The roller coaster ride continues as the Bills fall to the Dolphins 30-13. We're talking about that and more this week on the Wandering Buffalo podcast.
You're now listening to the Wandering Buffalo podcast with your host, Justin Goddard.
Bills Mafia, welcome into another episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show on the Buffalo FamBase podcast network. My name is Justin, and I am your host as always. And start out by saying sorry I missed you last week after a big win over the Chiefs. Dealing with a really bad cold. It's still kind of there right now, but much worse last week, and just no way it was happening. It kind of works out for me, though, to be able to kind of talk about like a zoomed out version of these past two games and kind of this roller coaster ride we've been on with this team, this dichotomy of the two teams that we see of playing against the Chiefs, looking like it wasn't a perfect game, but kind of firing on all cylinders, getting up to beat this older brother that's been beaten up on us for years, and then following it up with just an embarrassing loss to the Dolphins, team that you've just absolutely dominated, a team that's, depending on how you want to look at this, pretty much packed it in for the year. Week 10, they fired their GM. They're trading players away. They're shopping other players, and for them to show up to this game and look so, there just wasn't much fire there. It kind of felt like they got themselves all hyped up for this Chiefs game, and then it was just like a hangover against the Dolphins. And I mean, it's all the football cliches, the any given Sundays, that's why we play the games, all those things. And at the end of the day, we get to the playoffs, whatever. We're not going to be too focused on what wins and losses happened in October. But in a season where, we were talking about maybe getting the 1 seed and really felt like we should still win the division, we're now sitting second place in the division, and we're a game and a half back from the Patriots, and they have the head-to-head win over us, and we now have a division loss. Still a lot of football to play. Still, I think about the year with the Dolphins. I think we were 6-6, and it comes down to week 18, and we're able to beat the Dolphins for not only we're able to beat the Dolphins to stay in the playoffs and win the division. So there's a lot to deal with this Bills team, but I still kind of keep coming back to, if we get in the playoffs and Josh Allen is the quarterback, there's a chance. So kind of as the weeks go by, I'm feeling less confident that this is the year that we win it all, but there's still some hope, some belief there. And something that I have been saying for the last couple of years is, like, it just wouldn't feel right if the Bills finally won a Super Bowl and it was the year that we all expected it, right? It has to be. I've always felt like it's going to be a year with a lot of turmoil and like us all wanting to jump off the ship and have to buy back in, something like that. So we'll see where it goes. But looking specifically at this Miami game, I wanted to start with talking about the defense, because there's kind of been a lot more talk about the defense being bad this week than I had expected. And, you look at the final score and you see 30-13, and, you know, it's easy to think that the defense just sucked. But what I think the much bigger story of this game, and kind of from a larger viewpoint of the season, is kind of the way in which this team wins football games. And for me, was the defense perfect? No, not obviously. But for the better part of 3/4 of this game, it was a 2-score game. And it's kind of the last 2 touchdowns, they're like embarrassing to an extent, because the Dolphins are going to be running it to try to run out the clock, and you get gashed for 2 really big runs. It's it's also kind of the story of the game for me of you're already down a ton of personnel on defense because of injuries. You got practice squad guys playing for you. You get Landon Jackson finally involved in the mix because of other injuries, and he lasts 3 plays before ending up on IR. It's just kind of an embarrassment of injuries on defense. And through all that, like I said, 3/4 of the game, it's a 2-score game. And I also factor into that, you're going down to Miami. It's in the 80s. It's humid. You've been used to being in Buffalo, or we're headed into full-fledged winter, and you already have guys playing more snaps than you want them to because of injuries. And then the offense does really nothing to do them any favors. And I'll extend that to Sean McDermott as well. So it's kind of more of a hat tip to the defense for me for kind of being able to hold it down and give the team a chance through the majority of the game. And the offense just not being able to do anything to help them out. And this kind of takes me into, like I said, the kind of the story of the script of this game, and then to a larger extent, how we win games in general. And our offense, and that kind of the way our complementary football runs here is our offense gets the running game going. We can build the pass off of that, get play action involved. We stay 2-dimensional, and we want the other team chasing. And I think that's kind of the perfect recipe for this game. We know Tua struggles. We've seen it firsthand quite a few times, and we know the weapon that Devon Achane is. And in this game, the Dolphins start with the ball. Uh, it was a lemony snicket drive for them. They end up just kind of going backwards, and on 3rd and long, it's an arm punt, whatever. I don't care. It's an interception. The defense comes up big for you on the first drive. A 3-and-out, and you ended it at not even a 3-and-out, but a 2-and-out, and you end it with a turnover, and you give your offense the ball. And comes down to, it was either 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, and McDermott elects to punt the ball. And Josh is calling to go for it. I think we're all at home saying go for it. And in a game like this, and it's kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth here, of like needing to respect every team in the NFL, but also being realistic about you're playing a team that's currently the laughingstock in the NFL. And for me, them starting with the ball, defense gives it to you real quick. you're at a 4th and 1 with MVP quarterback and you choose to punt it. I just think of how differently this game could go just from that one decision. If you convert that 4th down, you turn that drive into points. Now, you're 5-6 minutes into the game and Miami's down, and all of a sudden they're already thinking about how to not be two-dimensional and not leaning into the run game. And I think that's not just like a feeling I have. That's looking at the Dolphins and seeing how they've chased points this year and how they'll abandon the run game, even though Achane is a top 2 weapon on their team. So instead, you punt, they go down the length of the field, they score. And that was kind of just a microcosm of this game for me. And then, then the next 4th down, you do go for it and you don't get it. And it's kind of like, if you didn't go for the first one, why are you going for the second one? And now it was like a double momentum swing against you. And kind of, those are coaching decisions that I didn't like. And ultimately, watching the offense in this game, everything looked hard. Nothing looked easy. It was sloppy. It was ugly. But ultimately, it really came down to these 3 turnovers. And in a game where your defense, who is all sorts of hobbled, gives you the ball back twice, the Bills turn it over 3 times. And while it didn't look super easy or fun or sexy, the Bills ultimately were moving the ball, and all 3 of their turnovers were just absolutely brutal. And there's a fumble by James Cook deep in Miami territory. You got to figure you were coming away from that drive with points, whether it was 3 or 6. You were likely to come away from that drive with some points. You also have Josh Allen throw an interception in the end zone. Again, deep in Miami territory. Got to figure there were some points there. And of looking at the way the defense was able to hold you down in this game, you're talking at least 6 points there. And like I said, that they kept them to 16 for the majority of the game. Even when we were down 16 with just the 4th quarter left, we still have Josh Allen. This is still Miami. I still felt pretty good about winning this game. And if you were able to have any sort of points on those possessions, I think it feels completely different. And it's not just for the Bills, but for Miami. Of all of a sudden, maybe they feel a little bit more pressed to keep putting up points. Maybe we see another Tua interception. Maybe they move away from Achane a little bit, and you don't know, but just 2 absolutely brutal turnovers. And then we have the surrender kneel down right before half. Don't like that. I mean, you have timeouts. You have something like 30, 40 seconds left, and Josh Allen. And you're down 2 scores on the road against a team that you are something like 10-point road favorites against, and you don't even try to move the ball maybe enough to get a field goal, to get something to come away from the half with. I mean, just another coaching decision that I can't get on board with. You're talking even if you come away from that drive with a field goal, you're going into the half with a little bit of momentum, you're getting the ball back. You score out of the half, all of a sudden it's 10-16. That's a very different game than what was going on. So can't get on board with the decision to go for it on the first the decision not to go for it on the first 4th down, the kneeling it down and getting out of there before halftime, don't like that. And ultimately, I just feel like we've we talked about this a lot of Sean McDermott being an aggressive coach, but he tends to make more aggressive decisions using his defense when he has not just one of the best players in the league right now, one of the best players in the history of the league at quarterback, dual threat, horse of a quarterback, and, on the first 4th and 1, where you could have really set the tone for the game, you opt to punt rather than put the belief into the offense. And it kind of moves into more of the same in the second half. But the third turnover comes up, and this is where I was talking about, even being down 16, going into the 4th quarter. I'm still sitting there on the couch thinking, we got Josh Allen. This is the Dolphins. This game ain't over. And kind of just like that, the cape comes on a little bit, and Bills are really moving down the field. Josh Allen converts a 3rd down with his legs and just keeps trying and trying for more yards. And this was kind of similar to the Cook fumble, and that this real struggle to get an extra yard or two ends up being a fumble. And that was kind of the icing on the cake there of points on really any of these possessions that the offense had moved the ball or were moving the ball. And instead of coming away with anything, you turn the ball over. You let Miami control the clock some more. You let Miami keep running at you. And like I said, not only is the defense dealing with a ton of injuries, but you're on the road in temperatures that you haven't been used to. And the majority of the injuries are on your defensive line. You got practice squad guys playing in the middle. You got Joey Bosa playing with a club on his hand. You got Daquan Jones kicking out to play defensive end. Like this was a game where you really needed the offense to get those points, so we can do a little bit of pinning our ears back and going after the quarterback instead of having to try to control the trenches with practice squad guys and people playing out of position and playing higher snap percentages when it's probably the hottest game they'll play all year. So I just feel like the offense didn't do the defense any favors in this game, and that was very apparent as the game wore on. As always, kind of looking forward in the season, I'm still sitting here. I don't have the same confidence that I did back in September, but I still have a lot of confidence in this team going somewhere and kind of righting the ship. And maybe it will never be as pretty as we want it to be this year, but there's still a lot of good to like on this team. I think you're still waiting to get pieces back on defense that'll help bring it together. I think you're still leaning into a lot of youth that can continue developing and getting better. But the injuries have just been brutal. And now you kind of look at the offensive side of the ball, and Kincaid has been your most consistent weapon, and you've really felt like you were missing Joshua Palmer. And what happens in this game? Kincaid goes out, and it's right as Joshua Palmer is about to come back. Looks like he's going to play this week. So it's hard for the offense to be that dependent on any one player being able to make the rest of the offense be able to run, but that's where we're at right now. So hopefully we can stack enough wins to get to the playoffs, and we can have some level of health on both sides of the ball. That's my biggest challenge right now, is being able to believe that this run of injuries is going to stop at some point, because it's just been constant, and it's get one guy back and somebody else is gone. It's, you know, get somebody back and 2 games later they're out with a bigger injury that costs them more time. So it's really challenging. I will say that they're we're at this point of the season where the Bills don't do anything at the deadline, and comes out afterwards that, Brandon Bean talks about uh, the in-division trades, the teams not wanting to make deals with us. And then I guess it's the big one for me. The 2 players that were my pipe dream were Quinnen Williams and Jalen Waddle. And it sounds like we were in on both of them. And this game, it was very obvious that we could use a guy like Jalen Waddle. And not only could we have used him on offense, but he torched us for Miami. And it comes out afterwards that the price was a 1 and a 3. And the Bills were willing to meet that, but they wanted to give a 2027 one and not a 2026 one. And I wish that news had never come out, because I don't care what year it is. You had a very reasonable contract to deal with there in Waddle. It fit into your cap. He's a young player, like entering his prime. He's put up massive numbers. I would have a really hard time buying into the logic of why we would give up a 2027 one, but not a 2026 one. So I wish I had never seen that report. It is what it is. We're past the deadline. That didn't happen. And we're in the part of the year where it looks like Gabe Davis is pretty close to being activated. And honestly, I can get myself excited for that. And I know it's not the move any of us wanted. It's not sexy. It's not some, young first round stud that we expect to immediately be the number 1 receiver. But we've heard Josh Allen talk a ton about trust, and like trusting what he sees, trusting guys to be where he thinks they're going to be. All these different forms of trust that he's talked about. And I'm not sitting here saying that Gabe Davis is going to be a player that is the savior of our season. But to have a guy that you can bring in week 11, week 12, whatever, and that guy being a cheap option on your practice squad who has a ton of success with Josh Allen, particularly in the playoffs. I think that the book isn't written on some of these other guys, in, Joshua Palmer coming to the team and looking like he was still developing chemistry with Josh Allen, of course, and what was looking like it was going to be his breakout game is where he got hurt naturally. It's the 2025 Bills. I don't think the book is written on Keon Coleman. He's still super young, late transition to football. But I think for this iteration of the Bills, Gabe Davis can come in and have a role and be a meaningful piece to this offense. And I don't expect him to be some crazy game-breaking receiver, like I said. But I think when we look at the offense, and as ugly as it looks at times, they are able to put up points. They are able to move the ball. I do think that one piece that Josh Allen really trusts could make a huge difference for what this offense looks like. We also added Morgan Fox to the practice squad. I think for everything that we have been dealing with across the defensive line, I do think that he's a guy that could find a role in this defense and find a way to help this defense. And we also added Hardman. I don't know what to make of Mecole Hardman. I know he has some explosive return abilities, a lot of experience doing that, and I think that from that perspective, I think there's a path to him finding a role for this team, especially when Codrington has been your return specialist, and he's a game day inactive for the last several weeks. I think that's a path to him getting a jersey on game day. What he could possibly be for the offense, I think there's easy paths to getting excited for that type of guy, and being able to look at the Bills and like, hey, where do we not threaten people like on the boundary and stretching vertically? I think you could see a path to that, but I also look at it as speedy guys that can be vertical receivers that we have in Elijah Moore and Curtis Samuel that we haven't been able to get much out of. So, adding a guy after week 10, how much should I get excited about what he could bring to the offense? I don't know, but it's an interesting name at the very least for me. And I guess we'll see where that all goes, how fast he can get a jersey on game day. Is he just kind of like emergency depth on the practice squad? We'll see. We'll see how that all shakes out. But a lot of football left to play this season. We'll see how it all goes. We'll be here every step of the way. So I thank you for joining me on this week's episode of the podcast. As always, it'd be wonderful if you could like, share, subscribe, tell a friend about the show if you're enjoying it. Most importantly, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes coming out every week. We will be back next week, hopefully talking about a win. And until then, and as always, go Bills.